I guess spirals are doing okay. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I wanted to bring to you a video discussing spirals because a lot of people are anticipating that Spiral is going to become a tier 1 contender very soon once we get double helix in Circuit Break, which is only a few weeks away if you think about it, and especially if you plan on attending any competitive events, especially YCS Dallas, because it just so happens that Circuit Break's release falls on the same weekend as YCS Dallas. So that's going to get a little bit crazy, but that aside, I want to discuss some of the stark differences between the TCG and the OCG when it comes to spirals, because a lot of people are speculating that this deck is going to be a massive tier 1 contender. Some people think that it's just going to be completely tier 0 format, because when you look at the OCG and what's happening here, Spiral's currently taking up 77% of the OCG's meta, basically borderline tier 0 at this point, which means it's absolutely fucking dominating and wrecking people's shit. But I think there's a lot of differences, and I want to kind of provide a more objective, analysis of this, because I'm on the fence that it possibly could take over, but I think there's a lot of differences, and those differences that are in the TCG actually make quite a substantial difference when it comes to analyzing Spiral's positioning in the meta. So what I wanted to start off with discussing is the card pool, because the OCG does have a slightly varying card pool when it comes to Spiral's ability to perform than we will here in the TCG, especially upon release of Circuit Break for YCS Dallas primarily. It's going to change as the format progresses, but for the most part, at least for the first month, there's going to be a very substantial difference. So I wanted to go ahead and discuss that. First off, the first card I wanted to discuss is Link Kuriboh. Now, Link Kuriboh is probably one of, the lesser cards that really matters in terms of everything that the deck needs to perform well, but it does make a substantial difference. The reason for that is because its two effects are actually very relevant. The first effect, that you contribute a level 1 monster to special summon it back onto the field, is actually very pertinent because you're able to reuse and recycle your quick fixes, because quick fix happens to be a level 1, and then you're able to get another use out of it, getting you another search, and possibly getting you another monster back on the board that you can further, up your Link summons and continue to with your combos. So that actually matters a lot. Now, the other effect that matters is the fact that it actually can negate an attack as well. And it may not seem like that big of a deal, but in terms of Spiral's ability to create a massive board, the fact that it has the ability to negate an attack in addition to everything else it already provides can actually be a very big deal. And I think that's something a lot of people might overlook, but it does make a big difference. We're not supposed to get Link Kuriboh here in the TCG. It's going to be coming as a jump promo, but that's not going to be at least for a couple more months. And again, is it going to make all the difference in the world? Not really, but it is something, because it is a Link 1, it's very easy to summon, it's very easy to abuse with quick fix, that it is something that makes Spirals just a little bit better in the OCG than they are here in, or how they will be, I should say, here in the TCG. Now, moving on, there is also the Lyras Starling monster, Lyras Starling, I believe the name of the card is, and again, is this a card that really matters in the long run? Not really, but it does actually make a very significant difference, especially in the mirror match. For those of you who don't know, Lyras Starling essentially just takes 2 level 1s to make as an Xyz monster, and the effect allows you to search pretty much a DD Crow from your deck and add it to your hand. Now, this is important for 2 reasons. First off, because you're using your quick fixes as Xyz material, they actually won't get banished because the quick fixes effect is no longer active, and since it's using Xyz material and is no longer on the field, it's going to go to the graveyard rather than get banished. So that's actually probably the more significant aspect of the Lyras Xyz monster's ability, is that it allows you to get your quick fixes back in the graveyard to continue recycling them. Obviously, this can be alleviated with some other rank 1 Xyz monsters as well, but being able to search that DD Crow is the second reason why this card is good, and this primarily is the case for the Spiral mirror match, because if you have a search DD Crow in your hand going first, and you're playing in the the mirror match, you just have to banish the quick fix right off the bat, and they're pretty much screwed unless they have a very good follow-up play moving forward. DD Crow also can be very relevant for some other matchups as well, like ABC, but I think that's a lot more minor in the grand scheme of things. But ultimately, it's still a card that we here in the TCG don't have that just makes the OCG version of SPYRAL that much better, even if it's marginal. Now, the last and probably most important card when it comes to SPYRAL is TriGate Wizard. Now, TriGate Wizard is a fantastic Link 3 monster that we're going to be receiving in a Link structure deck that doesn't come out until November. So that's very important because for YCS Dallas, as well as any other regionals or anything until that structure deck is released, we are not going to have this card. Now, you're probably wondering why this matters. Well, TriGate Wizard has two extremely powerful effects that help bolster SPYRALs and takes them completely over the top. The first one is that if it's co-linked to at least two other Link monsters, you're able to banish one card on your opponent's field, and that's just huge because it's essentially just free removal at that point. But the second effect, which is the much bigger and more impactful effect, is that if it's co-linked to three different Link monsters, you're able to negate any card or effect once per turn, and that's just fucking ridiculous. And the reason that's ridiculous is not only because you can just stop your opponent's biggest threat, but it also banishes the card as well, so if it has a grave trigger, it's not going to trigger as well, so you're basically removing that card from the game entirely. Now, if you look at the boards that SPYRAL is able to amass, one of the biggest weaknesses of those boards is board wipes, because SPYRAL Resort protects your entire board essentially from being targeted, and then the sleeper's already being protected by Last Resort, and all these different things, but the deck inherently doesn't have any protection from something like Regeki or Dark Hole. But TriGate Wizard gives the deck that added protection so that you can absorb a board wipe and it's not going to matter. Now, obviously, the better players are going to try to bait the TriGate Wizard before they go into board wipe, but if their hand isn't suitable enough to do that, then it might not matter ultimately, and then you still have to play through that sleeper and through all the other cards that the SPYRAL player has, like Utility Wire, and it's not going to do you any fucking good. TriGate Wizard's definitely a card to look out for. It is incredibly dangerous and incredibly powerful, but the fact that we are completely devoid of this card at the inception of SPYRAL's initial, let's say, showcase into its full power form actually makes a very significant difference, and that's something you really need to consider. Now, lastly, I want to discuss the meta itself, because obviously SPYRAL can do well on its own without these specific cards, but the meta is much more important in the grand scheme of things because formats essentially define how well decks perform. And our format here in the TCG is much different than in the OCG for two big reasons, I would say. First off is because of Masterpiece and Diagram still being at 3. If you take a look at a SPYRAL deck list, and if you're going up against a Masterpiece that's immune to monster effects and either spell or trap, I would say trap's probably more ideal against SPYRAL because they don't really have spell cards that affect you unless they happen to play a board wipe. SPYRAL actually has a very difficult time dealing with that Masterpiece. Now, even though you've got cards like SPYRAL Resort protecting all of your cards from Masterpiece, if you don't open with that Resort, you're having to go through two lines of offense that the True Draco player is going to have. You're going to have the initial Tribute if they use a trap effect to Tribute summon for that Masterpiece and ultimately kill something off with the trap being sent to the graveyard, and then you have the second wave of defense where they can banish that trap and pop a card on the field. So again, if you don't have that Last Resort, you're susceptible to the True Draco player's Masterpiece, and it's going to be a really rough time. But if you're totally just focusing on Masterpiece's immunity in general to monster effects, it's actually really difficult to kind of deal with this because you look at the extra deck as well as the main deck and there isn't really a lot you can do, especially if it's monster trap immune, because that means if the Draco player also has Diagram on the field, the Masterpiece is going to be on 3250 and immune to being destroyed by battle in the first time it would be destroyed. So that actually makes a very big difference in your ability to deal with that Masterpiece, and something you definitely want to consider whether you're going to be playing SPYRALs or or if you're trying to combat the deck and trying to figure out options to deal with it. Now, obviously the deck isn't as consistent, but it's still able to turbo out Masterpiece in True Draco Demise variants, and I think that actually makes a very significant difference compared to the OCG where Masterpiece and Diagram are completely banned. Now, the second deck I want to discuss is Pendulum Magician, because although Pendulum Magician does exist in the OCG, it's not as consistent and as full power, let's say, as it is here in the TCG. And the reason I want to discuss Pendulum Magician is because the deck is incredibly consistent, and if SPYRAL goes toe-to-toe with another deck that is as consistent as itself and is able to put out cards like Time Pendulum Graph for disruption and all these other things that can actually have a very significant impact on the board, then it's going toe-to-toe with a deck that can pretty much do what it's capable of doing going first as well, and then it actually might not be as overpowered as a lot of people think. So that's another thing to keep in mind with our meta as well. Ultimately, I don't know what's going to happen. I definitely think that SPYRAL is going to be a good tier 1 contender, especially once we get TriGate Wizard in November. Be sure to keep an eye out for YCS San Diego for that. But is it going to be a tier 0 format? I think because we still have True Draco and Pen Magician at full power, I don't think SPYRAL is going to be as overpowered as everyone is saying. I could be wrong, but I think that because our meta is so different, it actually makes a significant enough difference that it's not going to reflect the OCG this time around. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about SPYRALs entering the TCG. Do you think it's going to be a tier 0 format? Do you think Masterpiece and the Pen Magicians actually put the deck in check? Be sure to share your thoughts below. I'd really love to hear what you have to say. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time. 1, 2, 3.